The moment you try to fix everything is the moment you start losing everything. And Lucas Bennett learned that the hard way, because for most of his life, he believed that caring meant correcting, that love meant improving, that if something was broken, it was his responsibility to fix it. Lucas was the kind of person people admired at first. He was sharp, observant, always noticing the smallest details others missed. At work in a small marketing office in downtown Chicago, he would quietly adjust his coworkers' presentations, rewrite emails before they were sent, and point out tiny mistakes no one else even saw. At home, he would remind his younger brother how to manage money, correct his mother's decisions about bills, and suggest better ways to handle everything from groceries to schedules. And in his relationship, he thought he was being helpful. He would finish her sentences, suggest better words, recommend how she should respond to people, even guide her choices in small daily situations. In his mind, he wasn't controlling, he was helping, he was fixing what could be better. But slowly, something began to change. People stopped sharing things with him, conversations became shorter, smiles became forced, and the warmth he once felt around others started to fade. But Lucas didn't notice it at first, because he was too focused on what still needed to be fixed. One evening, after a long day at work, he sat across from his girlfriend in a quiet coffee shop. The soft hum of conversations and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. She was telling him about her day, about a small decision she had made at work, and without even thinking, Lucas interrupted. "You should have handled that differently," he said calmly, reaching for his cup. "If you had just waited or maybe said it this way, it would have turned out better." He thought he was helping, just like always, but this time, she didn't respond right away. She just looked at him. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't even sad. It was something else, something heavier, something final. "Lucas," she said quietly, "do you ever stop trying to fix everything?" He blinked, confused. "I'm just trying to help," he replied, his voice steady, but she shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "You're trying to control everything." The words landed harder than he expected, but before he could respond, she continued. "I'm not a problem you need to solve, I'm not something you can fix." And for the first time, Lucas felt something shift inside him, something uncomfortable, something he didn't know how to correct, because this wasn't a mistake in a sentence, or a small decision he could adjust. This was something deeper, something he couldn't rewrite. And as he sat there, staring at her, he realized he didn't have the right answer this time. He didn't have a better version of what she had just said, and that was the moment everything began to fall apart. Even though he didn't fully understand it yet, Lucas sat there in silence, the noise of the coffee shop fading into the background as her words repeated in his mind again and again. Not something you can fix. He had heard criticism before, small disagreements, different opinions, but this felt different. It was not about being right or wrong, it was about something deeper, something he could not immediately understand. He tried to respond, to explain himself, to find the right words that would somehow repair the moment, but for the first time, no words came out, and that scared him more than anything, because Lucas always had an answer. He always knew how to adjust, how to improve, how to make things better, but now he felt stuck, like he was standing in a place where none of his usual solutions worked. She gently pushed her chair back and stood up, not in anger, not in frustration, but in quiet certainty, and that calmness made it even harder for him to react. "I need space," she said softly, and before he could say anything else, she walked away. Lucas remained seated, staring at the empty chair across from him, his coffee untouched, his mind racing, trying to replay every second, every word, every small detail that might explain what just happened. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past his windshield, but he barely noticed them. His thoughts were louder than anything around him. He told himself that she was overreacting, that he was only trying to help, that people often misunderstood intentions, but deep down, something felt off, something he could not correct or rewrite. Over the next few days, things only became more confusing. She did not respond to his messages the way she used to. Her replies were short, distant, almost like she was slowly stepping away from him. At work, Lucas noticed the same pattern. His coworkers stopped asking for his input, meetings felt colder, conversations ended. Quickly, even his brother avoided long discussions with him, choosing instead to give short answers and move on. It was as if the more Lucas tried to be helpful, the more people pulled away, and this made no sense to him, because in his mind, he was doing everything right. He was fixing problems before they grew, preventing mistakes, improving outcomes, yet the results were the opposite of what he expected. One night, sitting alone in his apartment, Lucas stared at his phone, rereading old messages, looking for something he missed, something he could fix. But the harder he searched, the more exhausted he felt. His head leaned back against the couch as a quiet question surfaced for the first time. What if the problem was not them? What if the problem was not the situation? What if the problem was him? He immediately pushed the thought away. It did not feel comfortable. It did not fit the way he saw himself. Because Lucas believed he was the one who made things better, not worse. But still, that small question lingered in the back of his mind, growing quietly, waiting for an answer he was not ready to face yet. The next morning, Lucas woke up with a heavy feeling in his chest, the kind that lingers even before your eyes fully open. His apartment was quiet, too quiet, and for the first time in a long while, there was no message waiting for him, no notification, no small sign that things were normal. He sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the floor, trying to organize his thoughts the way he always did, step by step, problem by problem, but this time nothing felt clear. Everything felt tangled, like a knot he could not loosen no matter how carefully he tried. He went through his routine anyway, making coffee, checking emails, getting dressed for work, telling himself that structure would help him regain control. But even the smallest things felt off. The coffee tasted bitter, the air felt heavier, and his mind kept drifting back to the same question he had tried to ignore the night before. What if the problem was him? At the office, Lucas walked in with the same confident posture he had always carried. But something had changed. He noticed it immediately in the way people greeted him, quick nods instead of conversations, polite smiles instead of genuine ones. During the morning meeting, he sat quietly, waiting for a moment to contribute, and when it came, he spoke as he always did, pointing out a small flaw in the strategy, suggesting a better approach, expecting the usual acknowledgement. But this time, the room went silent for a second too long. Then the manager simply said, "Let us move forward with the original plan," and continued without looking at him. Lucas leaned back in his chair, confused. He was not wrong. He knew he was not wrong, but somehow that did not matter anymore. As the day went on, he tried to hold back, to observe instead of correct, but it felt unnatural, like trying not to breathe. Every small mistake he noticed pulled at his attention. Every inefficient decision felt like something he needed to fix, and the more he resisted, the more tension built inside him. By the time he left the office, he felt exhausted, not from the work, but from holding himself back. That evening, instead of going straight home, Lucas found himself walking without a clear direction, the city around him buzzing with life, people talking, laughing, moving forward without overthinking every detail. He passed by a park and slowed down. Drawn to the quiet contrast, he stepped onto the path and walked toward a small lake, the water calm, reflecting the fading light of the sky. He sat down on a wooden bench, his shoulders slightly hunched, his mind still racing. For the first time in days, he was not trying to fix anything, not trying to solve anything, just sitting. And yet, even in that stillness, the discomfort remained, because he did not know how to exist without trying to change something. He watched as a gentle breeze moved across the surface of the water, creating small ripples that spread outward and then disappeared. And in that simple moment, a strange thought crossed his mind. The water did not try to hold its shape, it did not fight the movement, it simply changed and then returned to calm. Lucas found slightly unsure why that image stayed with him. And just as he leaned forward, lost in thought, he noticed someone sitting at the far end of the bench, an older man, quiet, still, as if he had been there the entire time, watching the same water, waiting for something Lucas had not yet understood. The old man did not look at Lucas right away. He simply sat there, his gaze resting on the water as if he was watching something invisible beneath the surface. Lucas shifted slightly, unsure if he should speak or leave. But something about the man's presence made him stay. After a few quiet moments, the old man finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. You look like someone who is trying very hard to control something that refuses to be controlled. Lucas turned his head, surprised by the accuracy of the words. I am just thinking, he replied, trying to keep his tone neutral. The old man smiled faintly, not in a way that challenged him, but in a way that understood him. Thinking is not the problem, he said. It is what you are trying to do with those thoughts. Lucas frowned slightly, unsure how to respond, because for the first time, someone was not asking about his situation, they were seeing through it. The old man reached down beside him and picked up a small handful of sand from the ground near the bench. Then he held it out toward Lucas. Take this, he said. Lucas hesitated for a moment, then extended his hand and accepted the sand. It felt light, almost weightless. Now hold it, the old man continued. Lucas closed his hand gently, the sand resting in his palm. Hold it. Tighter, the man said. Lucas tightened his grip, feeling the grains press together. Tighter. Lucas squeezed harder, and almost immediately, he felt the sand begin to slip through the spaces between his fingers. He opened his hand slightly and saw the grains falling, one by one, onto the ground below. He tried to adjust, to close the gaps, to hold on more carefully, but the tighter he held, the faster the sand escaped, until there was almost nothing left in his hand. He looked down, confused, frustrated, and slightly embarrassed, as if he had failed at something simple. The old man finally turned his head and looked directly at him. His eyes calm but sharp. Do you see it? He asked. Lucas shook his head slowly. See what? He replied. The old man leaned back slightly, his voice still gentle. The more you tried to hold on, the more you lost. Lucas stared at his empty palm, the realization not fully formed yet, but beginning to take shape. Some things are not meant to be controlled, the man continued. And the harder you try, the more damage you create. Lucas felt a quiet resistance rise inside him, because everything he had believed was built on the idea that effort leads to better results, that fixing things makes them improve. So what am I supposed to do? He asked, a hint of frustration in his voice. Just let everything fall apart. The old man shook his head slowly. No, he said. You learn the difference between holding and forcing. Lucas sat there in silence, his mind trying to process the words, because for the first time, the problem in front of him was not something he could solve with logic or correction. It was something he had to understand, and that felt unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and strangely important at the same time. Lucas looked down at his empty hand, the last grains of sand slipping away as if they had never belonged to him in the first place. He slowly opened his fingers completely, letting whatever remained fall without resistance this time, and for a brief moment, he felt something strange, not relief, not yet, but a quiet pause in the tension he had been carrying for days. I do not understand, he said honestly, his voice softer now. Less defensive. The old man nodded as if he had expected that response. Of course you do not, he replied calmly. You have spent your whole life believing that control is the same as care. Lucas sat still, the words settling into his thoughts, because they felt uncomfortably accurate. The old man continued. You think that if you do not fix something, you are neglecting it, that if you do not correct someone, you are letting them fail. Lucas exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering just a little. If I do not fix things, they fall apart, he said, almost as if he was trying to convince himself. The old man shook his head gently. No, he said. Some things fall apart because you try to fix them the wrong way. Lucas frowned, his mind immediately trying to analyze the statement, to break it into something logical, something actionable, but the more he tried, the more it slipped away from clear definition, just like the sand. Think about the people in your life, the old man said. Do they come closer when you correct them, or do they step back? Lucas did not answer right away, because he already knew the truth. He had seen it in small moments, the shorter conversations, the distant replies, the quiet way people began to pull away from him. They step back, he admitted quietly. The old man nodded once. And yet you continue to do the same thing. Lucas felt a slight frustration rise again, not at the man, but at himself, because he did not know any other way. Then what should I do? he asked, his voice carrying a mix of confusion and urgency. Just watch things go wrong. The old man leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on his knees. There is a difference between supporting and controlling, he said. Support allows things to grow, control forces them into your shape. Lucas looked back at the lake, the surface now completely still again, as if the ripples from earlier had never existed. You cannot shape everything, the man continued, and the more you try, the more you lose what matters. Lucas felt those words land deeper this time, because they connected to something real, something he had been avoiding, the memory of her voice, calm but distant. I am not something you can fix. He closed his eyes briefly, the weight of that moment returning, but now it felt different, not just painful, but meaningful, like a piece of a puzzle he had been missing. So what happens if I stop? Lucas asked slowly, almost afraid of the answer. The old man smiled faintly, his eyes returning to the water. That, he said, is something you have never allowed yourself to find out. And for the first time, Lucas realized that his entire life had been built on doing more, fixing more, controlling more, but he had never once considered what might happen if he simply let things be, and that thought, as simple as it sounded, felt like stepping into something completely unknown. Lucas sat quietly beside the old man, the air around them calm, but inside him, something was shifting in a way he could not fully explain. The idea of not fixing, not controlling, not correcting, it felt unfamiliar, almost wrong, like ignoring a responsibility he had carried for years. If I stop trying, Lucas said slowly, choosing his words carefully, what if everything actually does fall apart? The old man did not answer right away. Instead, he picked up another small amount of sand and placed it gently in his open palm, holding it loosely this time, the grains resting without slipping away. Look closely, he said. Lucas leaned forward slightly, watching. The sand stayed in place, unmoving. I am not forcing it, the old man continued. And yet it remains. Lucas studied the simple image, his mind trying to compare it with what he had just experienced. But you are still holding it, Lucas pointed out. The old man nodded. Yes, he said. I am holding it, not controlling it. The distinction felt small, but at the same time, it felt important, like a line Lucas had never seen before. You have confused these two your entire life, the old man said gently. You believe that if you do not tighten your grip, you will lose everything, but the truth is, your grip is what is making you lose it. Lucas exhaled slowly, the words settling deeper this time, because they matched what he had started to notice, not just here, but in his life, the distance from people, the quiet frustration in their voices, the way they slowly pulled away. So what does it mean to hold without controlling? Lucas asked, his voice calmer now, more open. The old man smiled slightly, as if this was the question he had been waiting for. It means you allow things to exist without trying to reshape them, he said. You support without taking over, you listen without correcting, you care without forcing change. Lucas repeated those ideas silently in his mind, each one feeling simple, yet difficult at the same time, because they required him to do something he had never practiced before, letting go of the need to improve everything. It sounds easy, Lucas admitted. But it does not feel easy, the old man nodded. Because you are not used to it, he replied. You have trained yourself to react, to fix, to control, and now you are being asked to pause. Lucas looked back at the lake again, the still water reflecting the dim evening light. And what happens in that pause? He asked. The old man's expression softened. In that pause, he said, you begin to see things as they are, not as you think they should be. Lucas felt something shift again, a quiet realization beginning to form, because for so long, he had been focused on what needed to change, what needed to be better, what needed to be corrected, but he had rarely taken the time to simply see things clearly, without judgment, without interference. And that is where peace begins, the old man added, his voice steady and certain. Lucas remained silent, not because he had nothing to say, but because for the first time, he was not rushing to respond, not trying to improve the moment, just sitting with it, letting it be, and in that stillness, he realized something simple but powerful. He did not need to solve everything right now, he just needed to understand what he had been doing all along, and why it had led him here. Lucas did not say much after that, he simply nodded slightly, as if acknowledging something he was not ready to fully explain. The old man stood up slowly, brushing the remaining sand from his hands. "You will not understand this all at once," he said. "Understanding comes from practice, not from thinking." Lucas looked up. "Practice what?" he asked. The old man smiled faintly. "Practice not fixing," he replied, and with that he began to walk away, leaving Lucas sitting alone by the lake once again. But this time, the silence felt different, not empty, but full of something new, something unsettled but meaningful. Later that night, Lucas returned to his apartment, the familiar space now feeling slightly unfamiliar, as if he was seeing it through a different lens. He placed his keys on the table and sat down, his mind replaying the conversation, especially one line that stayed with him. Practice not fixing. It sounded simple, but he knew it would not be easy, because his instinct to correct, to improve, to step in, was almost automatic. It was not something he consciously decided to do, it was something he had trained himself to do over years. The next morning, Lucas woke up with a quiet determination, not to change everything, but to try something different. At work, the same situations appeared as always. A coworker struggled with a presentation. Another made a small mistake in a report. Lucas noticed every detail immediately. The urge to step in rose just as quickly, almost like a reflex. He could feel the words forming in his mind, ready to correct, ready to improve. But this time, he paused, just like the old man had said. He took a breath and said nothing. The moment felt uncomfortable, almost wrong, like he was ignoring something important, but he stayed quiet, watching instead of acting. To his surprise, something unexpected happened. His coworker adjusted the presentation on their own, not perfectly, but enough. Another colleague stepped in to help with the report, offering a different perspective. The room continued to move forward without him needing to control it. Lucas sat there, slightly confused, because for the first time, he saw that things did not collapse without his intervention, they simply unfolded in a different way. Later that day, he received a message from his girlfriend, short and simple, asking if they could talk. Lucas stared at the screen for a moment. His mind immediately began preparing what to say, how to explain, how to fix what had gone wrong, but then he stopped, remembering the sand slipping through his fingers, remembering the words. Holding is not the same as controlling. When they met that evening, he felt the familiar tension return, the desire to explain everything, to defend his intentions, to make things right, but instead, he did something he had never done before. He listened. He let her speak without interrupting, without correcting, without trying to guide the conversation, and in that quiet space, he began to hear something he had missed all along, not just her words, but how she felt. And for the first time, Lucas realized that maybe the problem was never about fixing things, it was about understanding them, and that realization, though small, felt like the beginning of something he had never experienced before. She spoke slowly, choosing her words with care, as if she had been holding them in for a long time. Lucas sat across from her, his hands resting still on the table, resisting the urge to interrupt, resisting the instinct to shape the conversation into something more comfortable. "I always felt like I had to be better around you," she said, quietly, her eyes not accusing, just honest. "Like I was being watched, corrected, improved." Lucas felt those words land deeply, but he did not react the way he normally would. He did not explain, he did not defend, he simply listened, allowing the silence between her sentences to exist without filling it. "I know you meant well," she continued, "but it made me feel like I was never enough as I was." Lucas lowered his gaze for a moment, not out of shame, but out of recognition, because for the first time, he was not hearing her words as something to respond to, but something to understand. "I did not know," he said softly, his voice calm, without urgency, without trying to fix the damage in a single sentence, and that alone changed the tone of the moment. She looked at him, slightly surprised, because she expected resistance, she expected explanation, but instead, she found space, real space, the kind that allowed her to continue. "I do not need someone to fix me," she said. "I need Someone who can be with me, even when things are not perfect. Lucas nodded slowly, the words echoing something the old man had said by the lake: support without controlling, care without forcing change. It all began to connect, not as an idea, but as a lived experience unfolding in front of him. I think I understand that now, Lucas replied, his tone steady, not claiming certainty, just acknowledging progress. The conversation continued, not as a problem to solve, but as something to explore. They spoke about small moments, past conversations, the ways things had slowly shifted without either of them fully realizing it, and through it all, Lucas practiced what he had learned. He stayed present. He listened, he allowed pauses, and in those pauses, something new began to grow, something quieter, but stronger. After they parted that evening, Lucas walked home with a different feeling than before, not relief, not resolution, but clarity, the kind that does not come from fixing something, but from seeing it clearly for the first time. Over the next few days, he continued this new approach. At work, he listened more than he spoke. When he noticed mistakes, he paused, asking himself whether correction was truly needed or if the situation could unfold on its own. Sometimes he still spoke up, but with a different intention, not to control, but to support, and slowly, he began to notice subtle changes. People seemed more at ease around him, conversations lasted longer, the tension he once felt in small interactions began to fade. It was not immediate, and it was not perfect, but it was real. And perhaps the most surprising part was not how others responded, but how he felt. The constant pressure to fix everything began to loosen, the need to control every outcome slowly softened, and in its place, there was something he had not experienced in a long time, a quiet sense of ease, as if he no longer had to carry the weight of everything around him. And for the first time, Lucas realized that letting go was not losing control, it was gaining something far more valuable. Something he had been missing all along. She spoke slowly, choosing her words with care, as if she had been holding them in for a long time. Lucas sat across from her, his hands resting still on the table, resisting the urge to interrupt, resisting the instinct to shape the conversation into something more comfortable. I always felt like I had to be better around you, she said quietly, her eyes not accusing, just honest. Like I was being watched, corrected, improved. Lucas felt those words land deeply, but he did not react the way he normally would. He did not explain, he did not defend, he simply listened, allowing the silence between her sentences to exist without filling it. I know you meant well, she continued, but it made me feel like I was never enough as I was. Lucas lowered his gaze for a moment, not out of shame, but out of recognition, because for the first time, he was not hearing her words as something to respond to, but something to understand. I did not know, he said softly, his voice calm, without urgency, without trying to fix the damage in a single sentence, and that alone changed the tone of the moment. She looked at him, slightly surprised, because she expected resistance, she expected explanation, but instead, she found space, real space, the kind that allowed her to continue. I do not need someone to fix me, she said. I need someone who can be with me, even when things are not perfect. Lucas nodded slowly, the words echoing something the old man had said by the lake: support without controlling, care without forcing change. It all began to connect, not as an idea, but as a lived experience unfolding in front of him. I think I understand that now, Lucas replied, his tone steady, not claiming certainty, just acknowledging progress. The conversation continued, not as a problem to solve, but as something to explore. They spoke about small moments, past conversations, the ways things had slowly shifted without either of them fully realizing it, and through it all, Lucas practiced what he had learned. He stayed present, he listened, he allowed pauses, and in those pauses, something new began to grow, something quieter, but stronger. After they parted that evening, Lucas walked home with a different feeling than before, not relief, not resolution, but clarity, the kind that does not come from fixing something, but from seeing it clearly for the first time. Over the next few days, he continued this new approach. At work, he listened more than he spoke. When he noticed mistakes, he paused, asking himself whether correction was truly needed or if the situation could unfold on its own. Sometimes he still spoke up, but with a different intention, not to control, but to support, and slowly, he began to notice subtle changes. People seemed more at ease around him, conversations lasted longer, the tension he once felt in small interactions began to fade. It was not immediate, and it was not perfect, but it was real, and perhaps the most surprising part was not how others responded, but how he felt. The constant pressure to fix everything began to loosen, the need to control every outcome slowly softened, and in its place, there was something he had not experienced in a long time, a quiet sense of ease, as if he no longer had to carry the weight of everything around him, and for the first time, Lucas realized that letting go was not losing control. It was gaining something far more valuable, something he had been missing all along.